Most of our ancestors were pretty short. It's thought that over time, humans became taller, but huge skeletons, skulls, and even footprints have been found all over the world that suggest that some of our ancestors were actually giants. Theories suggest that these giants are what built the pyramids of Egypt, with evidence ranging from art depicting giant humans to freakishly tall mummified remains. There are even modern-day accounts of giant attacks. Discoveries are still being made about human ancestors with giant heads and teeth, and humanoid monsters with gigantic skulls and room for one eye, like the mythical Cyclops. So, how much of this proof is real? Did giants really walk the earth, and do they still? For hundreds of years, there have been various written reports of people unearthing giant human skeletons. The Giant of Castelnau is only one of the most famous examples. In 1890, anthropologist Georges Vacher de Lepage discovered 3 bone fragments, a humerus, tibia, and femoral midshaft, in a Bronze Age cemetery in France. Dating back to the Neolithic, these skeletal remains are estimated to have belonged to one of the largest human-like creatures on Earth. While the skeletal remains do seem entirely similar to a regular human skeleton, they're estimated to have belonged to someone 11 foot 6 inches or 3.5 meters tall. Even modern-day humans wouldn't be able to reach such insane heights. Another discovery made in 1890 in Egypt resulted in a sarcophagus being unearthed that contained 2 giant skeletons, one of a 3-meter tall man and the other of a 2-meter tall woman. That would mean that the woman was 6.5 feet tall while the man was almost 10. Since large skeletons are often found close to each other or buried together, some theorists believe that if giants did exist, they lived in groups, just like humans. Even when entire skeletons and complete bone fragments are hard to come by, strangely proportioned intact skulls have been found in burial sites and ruins, offering hints at the gigantic bodies they once belonged to. In 1913, giant skulls were found in the Ozark Cave in Arkansas. The cave had long been flooded by the time researchers made their discovery. With the help of a professional scuba diver, exploring the cave resulted in some interesting finds. Buried in the ash floor of a shelter surrounded by a 70-foot-tall stone wall, researchers uncovered a small cache of gigantic skulls and a few other skeletal pieces to go with them. But what was so strange was the remarkable size of the skulls. The researchers estimated that the largest of these skulls must have belonged to someone almost 10 feet tall. The isolated location, tall stone walls, and gigantic skulls suggest that the cave may have been home to a society of giants. With gigantic heads and bodies discovered, evidence of giant feet was bound to come up eventually. Michael Tellinger, a South African writer, discovered one huge footprint near the border of Swaziland. The giant 1.2 meter long footprint definitely looks like a human foot, complete with an arch and 5 toes. The slab of rock it's on is estimated to be between 2 and 3 billion years old, which suggests that if giants do exist, they've been around for a really, really long time. Geologists say that a giant would have had to step into fresh magma to imprint his footprint onto the giant granite rock, and locals have a legend about an ancient being who would run across the land on hot lava. But most scientists are skeptical that the oxygen levels that long ago would have been able to support a complex living being. However, with no other explanation as to how the footprint ended up in the rock, giants are as good of a guess as just about anything else. This giant finger looks like a pretty elaborate hoax, but it's got X-ray images and a certificate of authenticity to prove that it was a real discovery. The 38-meter or 15-inch long mummified finger was discovered in Egypt in 1988. Scientists believe that it belonged to a creature that was at least 5 meters or 16 feet tall. Other than its incredible size, the finger seems remarkably human in its structure and appearance, and it doesn't fit into any scientific theories about the size of historical humans or the other bones and remains that have been found. The discovery was actually made by a grave robber who found it in an undisclosed tomb. The finger, which is dark brown and covered in dry mold, remains a strange puzzle piece for researchers trying to confirm or deny the existence of giants, as the grave robber and his miraculous find have since disappeared. Across the US, there are numerous giant burial mounds, some as large as the Great Pyramid of Giza. In particular, the Cahokia and Monk's Mounds in Illinois and Missouri are so old and so extensive that it's hard to believe they could have been built without modern technology. But what's buried inside these mounds might just prove that it was giants who helped create such enormous structures. The Cahokia and Monk's Mounds are both 100 feet tall. There are old reports from New England of giant skeletons being unearthed from these mounds. These skeletons are reported to have 2 rows of teeth and jaws that could fit over a normal human's head. The height of these skeletons range in length from 7 to 10 feet. Modern discoveries of bones from these mounds confirm that they belong to humans much taller than what we're used to today. One particular report was backed up by Scientific American. It stated that one 10-foot tall mound contained the bodies of a larger female and her 3.5-foot long child, which researchers thought was about double the size of a child that age today. Some theories suggest that these mounds were built by the giants as graves for their own kind, and based on what hides within them, there's really no way to disprove this theory so far. In the summer of 2016, a so-called conspiracy started by an Israeli author claimed that in 2002, a monster dubbed the Giant of Kandahar was on the loose in Afghanistan. Several websites claimed that an American Special Forces soldier was attacked by an 1,100-pound, blade-wielding, 12-foot-tall giant from the Old Testament. Eventually, the giant was taken down by the military and whisked away to a secret facility, with the government claiming that he had never existed. It sounds pretty crazy, but a few interviews were done with civilians who claim to have seen the beast. The theory is that it was a Nephilim, which is described in the Bible as the offspring of gods and humans. The official report says that this particular soldier and others were the victims of explosives, but the author and those he interviewed are sticking by their original tall tale. This particular account seems far-fetched, but legends of giant Nephilims have been reported in both ancient and modern writings, suggesting that there may have been more truth to these giant hybrids than we think. According to the Greek historian Solinus, in writing dating back to 200 AD, the Greeks would often discover bones of immeasurable enormity. Today, in these same areas, researchers have discovered very particular giant bones that seem to belong to a Greek myth: the Cyclops. These giant skulls are likely what started the Greek obsession with the legendary creature. With a huge hole in the middle, it's easy to think that they had belonged to a gigantic one-eyed creature. Even today, new skulls are being unearthed, with some larger than all of the others. But while these skulls definitely fed the ancient legends of giants, today scientists are mostly certain that they actually belong to dwarf elephants, or even mammoths. Still, there are a lot of ancient writings that claim to have found more humanoid remains that are not so easily explained, and some of these strange Cyclops skulls are different from the others, suggesting that they could be from other elephant-like species, or something else entirely. The remains of Denisovans, a human ancestor, have been found all over Asia, but what's strange about these remains is that skulls, teeth, and jawbones, and these pieces are much bigger than the average humans. Denisovans are Neanderthal-like humans that disappeared about 50,000 years ago. The bones found suggest that this species was hardy and large. They've only been found at very high altitudes. For example, their bones are common on the Tibetan Plateau, at an elevation of 10,700 feet. It's likely they were able to adapt to living with less oxygen so that they could live so high up, or because they were so tall. Everything about the Denisovans seems to be big. Their heads in particular had giant molars, massive, thick jaws, and even large brain casings. It's hard to say how much bigger they were than the average human though, but scientists think the average Denisovan was about 200 pounds or 90.7 kilograms. There are proven facts of human giants existing throughout history, but these giants have a scientific reason for being so tall. The tallest man in medical history is Robert Pershing Wadlow, an American man who was born in 1918. In 1940, he measured 2.72 meters or 8 feet 11.1 inches tall. Wow! His greatest recorded weight was 222.71 kilograms or around 490 pounds. His daily food intake was about 8,000 calories, which is 3 times more than an average human. Gigantism in humans results from a dysfunction of the pituitary gland, and other humans have been known to suffer from this condition, including some of the tallest NBA players. Is it possible that this dysfunction could have caused ancient humans to grow to incredible heights as well, or were giants another species entirely? We may never be certain, but gigantism could explain the existence of some very large skeletons that were buried with more average-sized human remains. If any ancient society knew about giants, it was probably the Egyptians. The 3rd dynasty pharaoh Sa-Nakht was probably one of the most well-known Egyptian giants that we have proof of. He was about 8 inches taller than any average man who lived during the time. Although he was only 6'1.5", he probably towered above most of his citizens. But the entire Middle East has legends of giant humans, most of which were probably much taller than the pharaoh. There are ancient Egyptian accounts of humans ranging between 7 feet (2.13 meters) and 16 feet (4.8 4.88 meters tall. And stories and depictions of giants are abundant in Egyptian art. The construction of the pyramids is even attributed to these giants, which would explain why the Egyptians honored them through their art. With the amount of pharaohs and historical figures that are depicted as being large, the Egyptians may have worshipped the giants. If that's the case, the archaeological digs in Egypt just might be the gateway to the truth about these legendary creatures.